All right, so hi, welcome to Virtual Conferences and Webinars 101. Thank you so much for joining us after your lunch break. My name is Kelly McCallister, and I'm the non-traditional student librarian at Appalachian State University.
Hi, and we are co-presenting today, and I am Mollie Peuler, and I am the e-learning librarian here at Appalachian State.
So while we are called Virtual Conferences and Webinars 101, this is a presentation that will kind of teach you how you are able to do this sort of thing if you have an interest or a demand, especially in regards to librarianship. Librarians have a lot of responsibilities. And so the case study that we actually used in this presentation is a group of librarians. So if I have any librarians, please give a shout out because you're awesome. So just to kind of talk about how we started, the college and university section is the section of academic librarians within the North Carolina Library Association. If you were to Google the North Carolina Library Association, there is quite a few sections. There's community college section, there's the distance learning library services section, there's the paraprofessional section, government section. So academic librarians can be community college or four-year librarians from across the state of North Carolina. And when you become a member of this section, there are many opportunities for the librarians to get together both in person, both virtually. We are expected to provide a conference every other year and to provide some kind of activities for the librarians to get together throughout the year. Actually, Molly, would you mind moving to the next slide? Thank you. So for $5, you too can be a member of the college and university section. And when we were thinking about presenting online webinars as a part of our professional development, it was for a lot of reasons. Like I said, for those of you that may not be familiar with the field of librarianship, librarians have to do a whole lot of jobs for a very little or no budget. In fact, I think if I've got librarians in this room, you can all attest that you have been there at one time or another. And so professional development opportunities become key and pivotal for many librarians to learn about the newest developments in technology, the newest developments in online learning, distance education, anything and everything that are being used in the colleges and universities that they are employed at. But we don't get paid an awful lot. We generally don't have much of a budget. So professional development opportunities, free ones, becomes very important. So again, when you are a librarian, you go to library school and you learn a lot of practical hands-on experience, but there, conferences and traveling and service, it gets to be very, very expensive. And not many librarians actually have a travel budget. So many will join their national or their state library associations in order to find some kind of training that they can help to advance their job, keep up with the changes in technology and so on.
So as Kelly just mentioned, it can be hard to attend those face-to-face sessions depending on your travel budget. And even if you have a large travel budget, maybe you've spent all of that and you still find something that you want to attend and you don't want to miss out on. So the executive board of the college and university section became really excited about the opportunity to offer an alternative online conference. And while the executive board was excited, that we wanted to make sure that we were actually meeting the needs of the entire CUS section. So we decided to create a poll. We used Google Forms to create this form to send out. We wanted to poll members to determine which types of events and professional development opportunities would be most beneficial. And I don't know if it's surprising or not surprising, over 95% responded that they would be interested in attending and or presenting in a free virtual webinar. So that to the directors board meant that we should go ahead and explore this option. So the survey provided really a need to review types of web conferencing systems available and figure out which one was going to meet our needs. Again, this was the North Carolina Library Association College and University section, so members from different organizations. So while there might be a conferencing system at a particular organization, what could we use that could support what we hoped would be a large population of attendees? So that led us to our process for evaluating conferencing systems. So really 3 steps to this. take inventory of what you're going to prioritize. And really, I think this is a really important step. So we were doing what we thought was going to be a national type conference. We'll get to later on how it expanded from there. But maybe you're doing a conference strictly at your organization, whether that's a community college, public library, 4-year. Maybe you're just doing it in the English department. Your needs might be different than what ours were. So really pay attention to what matters to you before you begin those trials. And I do encourage you to perform a trial if you can. A lot of the systems are free, and if they're not free, they will provide a trial, because you'll see in a few moments, even though something says interactive assessment, what does that mean in person? So it will take time, but I encourage you to review and trial the systems, and then hopefully that leads you to choosing a system. So the CUS Executive Board, what we prioritized were assessment options. Assessment was very important. If we were going to make this big change, we wanted to make sure that it was actually successful. We wanted pre-registration with contact information. Automated follow-up emails were also very important to us. You'll see that we did consider some free and cheap options such as Google Hangouts and Skype, but they just didn't have some of these features. And it was also very important to us to record the sessions and make them available on YouTube on the NCLA website. So those were our 3 main priorities. And knowing that, when we trialed moving forward, we could really consider those. So there are really 8 that we were reviewing. The first 4 were kind of on the free or cheaper end. And you probably have some experience using a few of these, whether in your professional life, maybe just with students or small groups, or even in your personal life. But there are viable options, again, depending on your needs. I'm going to show you, let me just go ahead and skip ahead real quick. I have this little chart that's kind of showing what we were looking at. This was just a working document. And we have the number of attendees, the features, and the cost. But what I would also consider is the technological support and setup. When I was looking at Apache Open Office, which is an open source feature, it's not as easy to set up as some of the others. And sure, you only have to set it up once, but if that matters to you, maybe you're fine using conferencing systems, but you're not that technologically savvy, then you might want to consider that when you're reviewing your systems. And again, the number of attendees. As of this project that Kelly and I worked on, Google Hangouts, I believe it was only 200 attendees that could attend at a time. So if you want to have many more attendees than that, but that's something to consider as well. And then we have the 4 more expensive that were considered. And again, perhaps you've used some of these: Cisco WebEx, Adobe Connect, GoToWebinar, and Zoom. I do encourage you to check and see if your organization already uses one of these. So perhaps I see that someone in our room is from Rowan Cabarrus Community College. If there's something that's being used there, maybe it's Cisco WebEx, you could always use that for your conference or webinar that you're creating. I will say this, and something that Kelly and I ran into, it wasn't a problem, as members of the executive team of NCLA, we ended up using, Kelly was at App State at the time, still is, Zoom, and if that member circles off of the executive team, then what happens with the conferencing software that you decided to use? Do you allow someone else to use it, or do you need to find a new one? So that's something to consider. So again, this is just a working document that we used when we were exploring the different options. Again, price might matter for you. We didn't put that in the priorities, but you might want to, do a budget and figure out how much you can actually afford. Are you going to need this ongoing annually, or just for a few months? Is that a type of contract that's even available? And again, the interactive features will look one way on paper and perhaps another way as you're actually trialing. So some of these have really wonderful interactive features: polls, chat, analytics, automatic emails, but they might look a little bit different. And these, on this screen, you have some of the more expensive options, but there are, of course, the cheaper ones as well.
Thank you. So yes, so we decided to use one of our members, me. I had GoToWebinar. The library had purchased GoToWebinar because at the time, Appalachian State University had Blackboard Collaborate. Has anybody in this room used Blackboard Collaborate? That is my opinion. Blackboard Collaborate. In Western Carolina, interestingly enough, there are whole sections of the state that don't have internet access, including my neighborhood where I live. We have folks that come in that are students that have dial-up. We have every kind of the worst case scenario internet connection you could possibly have in this area of the world. And so Blackboard Collaborate just wasn't cutting it. So the library was kind enough to give me a subscription to GoToWebinar. And because I had already had GoToWebinar, we went ahead and used that. But we did a needs assessment anyway, because in case I left and took my GoToWebinar subscription with me, the college and university section wanted to make sure that they, had something that they could use. Thankfully, Appalachian State got Zoom, and we've been using that ever since. But like I said, if you've got somebody in your group that's already got access to a web conferencing system, go for it. But if not, definitely do that needs assessment. So when we were talking about professional development opportunities, we knew that they were open to the webinar. So we created this webinar Wednesday. And so we wanted to make sure that this was not available, not just for college and university section librarians, but we kind of wanted it open to all librarians, because no matter what, if you're a government librarian or a distance librarian or a paraprofessional, I mean, we all do a lot of the same things and we all come from the same background. So we wanted to make it open for all different types of subjects so that you're not hearing, 50 webinars about embedded librarianship. We wanted to be able to spread it out. So the title was cool. I thought it was kind of catchy, and I didn't make it up. I Googled it, and somebody else had used it, so I won't lie. And we also put we decided to make the sessions, and this should sound familiar, recorded and archived and placed on a YouTube site so that you can go to it later, because not everybody is able to register and go to a conference. Things come up, meetings, family, traffic. And so we wanted people to be able to go back and be able to look at the archives. And you'll find that we're doing the exact same thing today with our virtual. So next slide. So thank you. So one of the cool benefits about having a virtual conference was the budget. So back in 2014, we did a face-to-face, seriously one-day awesome conference in Charlotte that went really, really well. But as you can see, our budget was over $2,000 because we had to decide on a city in North Carolina. If you've ever been to North Carolina, it's not as big as Texas for all you Texans out there, but it's pretty long to get from one end to the other. And so we wanted to find a centralized place, which Charlotte kind of worked for a central place. And then you need to spend money on the venues so that people have a place to come, parking, food, registration, yada, yada, yada. It gets expensive, as you well know, because you've probably done this in your past. The nice thing about the virtual conference is that the budget was exactly $268.95, and that was the cost of lunch for all of the folks that were co-piloting all the webinars that were going on. So even though we were all running this from the CAE office, the same folks that are running the webinar today, we were running it from App State. Our budget was really just the cost of lunch to pay for the volunteers. So that was pretty awesome. And if you noticed in terms of attendance, we actually had more people attend than who wouldn't have been able to have the budget to drive to Charlotte. So when you think about the cost of the subscriptions to these webinar systems, think about the money you're saving in regards to not having to travel, to not having to have other people travel. I mean, it really does pay for itself in the long run. So this is our poll, just to kind of wake you up, because I know you just had lunch. In the chat box, we want you to share, or you can unmute yourself and talk, but if you would share with us your absolute worst webinar experience ever, and please don't let it be this one, that would be great. So give us a shout out or type it up if you're more comfortable doing that. Or even if we experienced the crickets, what was your worst webinar experience?
Well, I was going to say, even if you presented online for the first time and maybe you quickly learned something that you shouldn't do, because there's a first time, there's a learning curve for everyone. So anything that you want to share. But for me, kind of a pet peeve is when someone has their video on and perhaps I'm not aware that it's on and they're either eating or something like that. It's probably my pet peeve. What about you, Kelly?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I love when the cats and the dogs and the kids show up, but I did have one where a husband was looking for his pants and he came right into the screen, and yeah, he wasn't wearing them at the time. So that was a little awkward. So yeah, I think the keeping the webcams off can be a good thing.
So we have some good ones coming in. Not everyone muted. Definitely that it can be annoying. And a lot of times, well, you can see there's two of us, Kelly and I. We're both presenters, but oftentimes, and we're going to say this later on, you should have a backup person just to kind of co-pilot that can help you make sure the attendees are all muted, if you need to turn off someone's webcam, that type of thing.
It's always good to have a co-pilot because there's always something that's going to happen. And part of our webinar Wednesday series is that we always required that we have a practice session ahead of time because we're in technology right now, but we all know how anxiety-ridden this is, especially if you're not used to the system or if it's not going to work or your links, for whatever reason, you can't get in. So we always wanted to do a practice session with the presenters ahead just so that they can get comfortable. And if you know that somebody, like right now I'm driving and talking, so it's a little nerve-wracking, but if you know if somebody else is driving the system and handling the questions and dealing with the stuff that comes up, it makes it a lot easier to just take a deep breath and then present. So, having somebody work with you, whether if you're a one-person librarian or one person in the department and you want to do a series of weekly webinars for your students, get a grad student, get a work study student, get somebody that's really proficient, teach them how to use it and have them kind of co-pilot. It gives them experience. It gets students to come if they think that students are working, and it takes the stress off you to, have to kind of run everything and handle everything.
So a few of you mentioned presentations fading in and out, not working properly. Kelly mentioned practicing. I would say make sure that you're practicing where you're actually going to give the presentation. Because Kelly mentioned, I believe that she lives in Deep Gap where there is not a good internet connection. So if she practices in town and then presents in Deep Gap, it's going to be a really different experience likely. So
I'm lucky to get it to work.
I used to live in Deep Gap myself, so I'm familiar. So I do say try to practice where you're going to be presenting and on even the device that you're going to be presenting on as well.
Oh yeah, big time. And if you practice in one of those big audio rooms, if you're lucky enough to have a big conference room, do a practice run there too, and make sure you stay consistent because you just never know. So okay, great, thanks everyone. Yeah, that's kind of what I expected. So what we have here are kind of the webinar best and worst practices that we've experienced because we've been doing this webinar series since 2015, Molly, does that sound right?
2016.
Yeah. So definitely, if you are able, record and archive the presentation. Consider time differences. Oh, that was the best thing. So when we first started doing Webinar Wednesdays, we sent out the call to North Carolina. We were so excited. We thought we were going to get all of these people. We had 10 people showed up to the first one. And even though 10 is great, don't get me wrong, it's a great number. We thought, why don't we just make this national? Why this is virtual, this is online. Anybody and everybody can, with a wireless connection can come. So let's just do that. And then we started getting these huge registration numbers. We were getting 100, we were getting 150. Interestingly, not all 150 show up. But we decided, that would, first of all, got people coming, and if we record and archive the presentation somewhere, whether it's YouTube, whether it's your website, we found that by looking at Google Analytics that people were going back and watching it. So you're getting a lot. You're still, after a year, we're still getting views on webinars that we offered way back in September. But consider the time differences if you open nationwide, because we had folks from, oh gosh, Molly, we had Alaska, Canada, Trinidad, Tobago,
Mexico.
Oh, that was the best day ever. And then when I found out we have somebody from New Zealand, I hope you're in this room. That's awesome. I think that's the furthest.
Oh, we have an attendee in here, Kelly. If you look in the chat box, someone said they attended several of our webinar Wednesdays.
Oh, thank you. You're that person. Thank you. So yes, consider the time differences. And I love webcams. Webcams are great. It's nice to be able to see each other, to feel like we're all in the room. But because I mentioned we have our colleagues in other countries, there were bandwidth issues. The webcams were slowing down their viewing experience. So sometimes they were 6 to 10 seconds behind. So that was a little frustrating. So we just started turning. Maryland, I grew up in Maryland. It's a great place. Also, practice your NPR voice. Seriously. I know that I have the worst webinar voice ever, but there are voices where people say like a lot or a lot. If you're one of those people, practice. Because I don't know I know this is going to sound awful, but I've been in webinars where I just started counting how many times the person said like, and I totally tuned out the rest of the webinar because I couldn't get past that. Have a wing person, like Mollie said, get somebody to help you. And then include a certificate of attendance. It's a super easy thing you can do, but people love getting that. They have proof that they attended something. I know Mollie and I are on tenure track, wish us luck. So we try to keep all of our certificates to show that we've presented. But it's a super quick thing, and people really appreciate. Not everybody will ask for one, so don't think that you have to give out 150. Sometimes only 7 or 8 people will contact you. But consider offering one of those just because people will like to have that. Don't have email, Skype, Facebook open while presenting. There is nothing funnier than you're giving a serious presentation and your husband wants to know what's for dinner because he's chatting you and it pops up on your screen. That has happened to me. Using Prezi or other emotion presentation software, be wary about that. Make sure that your system that you chose can handle that, because again, sometimes with the bandwidth issues in other places, the Prezi can slow it down. It can be much for people, so just make sure that the system you choose can handle that. And don't not have a practice session. These are so important. They introduce you to the person. You're establishing trust with your co-pilot. You're getting used to the software. You're not so anxious about it because you've practiced it, you know it. If you've got Zoom like we do or GoTo, you can record. Some people like to record themselves so they can go back. So these are kind of our webinar best and worst practices. And if you have any, please give us a shout out in the chat box because we're always looking for ways to improve our current webinar series.
Of course. And in regards to not having Skype, Facebook, all of that stuff open, don't just minimize it because really it's the sound that can be a disruption as well. A lot of us get a ding when we have an email that comes in or even when we get a Facebook notification, that type of thing. I mean, honestly, it's a little type A, but to my mind, you never know what you might accidentally show. So I try to make sure that my desktop is clean. I try to make sure that everything is closed. It's a good motivator, actually, to make sure that you're organized on your computer and even in your office if you are using webcam for a moment. So I do encourage you to make sure that everything is not just minimized, but logged out of as well.
Oh, thanks, Alicia. That's all on Mollie. She is the slide queen. If you ever want advice on really cool slides, go talk to her.
Oh, thank you. But you are correct. Slide themes, that's a great one to add to the don'ts.
Yeah, we've seen those orange ones that blind you and you can't seem to look away through the whole presentation. So
Right. I mean, I think Kelly and I both attended the one that used Prezi. Okay. And Prezi's great. I've used it before, but for something like this, it just wasn't working. It basically wasn't advancing, and it just
kind of migraine city too. All that moving back and forth.
Oh, Mary just said the same thing. Triggers are migraine.
Mary, yes, exactly. Oh, transcripts for accessibility purposes. That is key. I know we that's definitely, making, I think that's our future thing to work on, Mollie, actually, is making that accessible, making all of these accessible. I mean, you do the transcribing when you are doing the archiving, but yeah, just during, that's interesting.
Yeah, once it goes into YouTube, you can have the captions created, but the transcript as well, yes. It's a great point. Anyone else have anything that these are great suggestions, honestly.
Yeah, I'm writing this down.
All right. Well, feel free to add to the box as we continue on.
Everyone's favorite topic, assessment. I was very happy with our overall assessment of our conference rating. So this was the virtual conference that we did a couple of years back. No average or poor. Woo! To me, that was good. So yeah, people were happy with it. And again, I think a lot of it has to do with making sure your system works, making sure you've got good people, making sure people that are presenting are comfortable with the system, kind of doing the practice sessions and having the co-pilot. They do make for a better conference. And, people that generally attend virtual conferences and virtual webinars, we're all technology nerds. We're used to it. We expect things to happen. Y'all tend to be a very patient crowd, so that's nice. People don't get up and leave as easily as we all would get up and leave if we were at a face-to-face conference. So it's I think that using webinars are great. If you got them, go for it. They're not scary. They work really well. So it was pleasing to see that overall they've been pretty popular. And the same with our webinar series.
Oh, we skipped. Hold on. There we go.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next one, actually, because assessment's great. Oh yeah, failures. This has always been my favorite topic. Not necessarily failures, but we learned from failures. And the first offered webinar Wednesday had fewer than 20 attendees, and it's good, but at the same time, I was a little disappointed. And that's when we decided we were going to open it up nationwide. And by opening it up nationwide, I literally went to all the free email listservs from every librarian association I could think of and just sent out emails. Same with you. If you're not a librarian, go to the instructional technology listservs and send out those emails. Go to your department listservs and send out those emails. Just find those where those people are and just send them out, and you'll be surprised how many people register. Don't be surprised your registration numbers are going to be bigger than your attendee numbers. That's just the nature of the business. You'll get 150 people register, but maybe 50 to 80 will actually show up. Less if you offer archives and recordings, because people know that they can go back and get it later. That's not a failure. That's just actually advice. I think one of the failures we had was with Google Forms, because I was just trying to figure out how to use it, and people weren't able to get in, or they were going in and filling things out and they were changing it. So be somewhat proficient with Google Forms before you send it out. Otherwise, you're like me, you're sending out 6 emails to 50 listservs apologizing for my ineptness with Google Forms, but we finally did get that worked out.
I don't think it was Kelly's ineptness. I mean, something with planning a conference like this, we were all working from different parts of the state as well. So that's another hurdle to get over, collaborating online. But what happened with the Google form was it wasn't changed to where only the group could edit. So it went out, and when someone was registering, they were basically editing the question. So a very simple thing to make sure that you correct. And Kelly's taking the blame. I'm not even sure it was her fault. So just make sure that you test all of that stuff before it goes out.
And another failure, which again isn't really a failure, you can never have too many sessions, numbers, and schedulings, but we found with our virtual conference, it was a long day. And I will just give a plug for my good friend Sam Harlow, who is actually presenting at the same time we are presenting right now. She is one of the best presenters. She's one of the best online librarians I've ever worked with, and she had 5 people attend her presentation because hers was at the very end. And I think people just get conference fatigue. You've been sitting in these rooms listening to this stuff all day. It was on a Friday. I don't know about you, but it was a gorgeous day in the mountains. People just left. So you might want to not have so many all at once, maybe spread it out. I know you want to include everybody and you want to have everything, but people, we always make jokes about our students' attention spans, but we're just as bad. So, kind of limit your numbers and schedulings. And then this way you don't have really awesome presentations that just don't get watched. But with that being said, people go back and they watch Sam's archive, and it's one of the highest rated ones. So it actually worked out in her favor.
So Kelly already touched on a few of these when she talked about our failures. Much of fixing those, turn those into successes. So it really depends on who your audience is. I mean, for us, college and university section of a library organization, of course, reaching out internationally and nationally made sense. And that allowed us, for our attendees and proposals, to triple. If yours is more of an internal webinar at your specific organization, then you might not have that to worry about. I do, as Kelly said, very much encourage you to archive the webinars. What you'll find is you may have, 300 attendees that register and maybe only 220 attend. But I know a lot of librarians and professionals, myself included, I'll sign up for something just so I'm emailed the archived video version. Or maybe I sign up and my day becomes really busy. I didn't pay for it, so it's okay if I miss it, but I still do want to check it out. So please do make those archived versions available. And that was definitely a success as we moved forward.